What it is, everybody, it's WEEDnesday, and I'm here with the Doc, again, to come and grace us with his amazing knowledge. And then, of course, we have Richard Hayward right here with, let me just tell you what this guy comes with, okay? Let me just tell you real quick, all right? Military service in South Korea, law enforcement in Florida, lifetime civil service, cancer survivor, cannabis advocate, running for Clarkston City Council, and all-around badass. So let me just tell you, okay, do you want to elaborate on any of that, Richard, about some of the things that you've done?
Oh, well, I was in the DMZ of Korea for 2 years, dealt with the North Korean soldiers. There was military armistice commission meetings that we'd have once a month, because there was never a peace treaty, it was just an armistice they signed.
Sure.
So it was just providing security. I lost my company commander. He was axed to death by the North Koreans. My deputy commander had his throat crushed. I was there for that one.
Good Lord.
But it was a pretty active place.
Yeah, I would imagine. What about, I hear rumors about a story that you foiled a heist of some kind. Is that true? Or a kidnapping?
A kidnapping. Oh, yes, there was Fort Lauderdale's where I was a policeman at, and I was working undercover, and there was...
Undercover?
Yeah.
Good Lord.
And it had a lot of prostitution on Federal Highway there, so we were just keeping an eye on it. A lot of crime comes from that. And I just happened to pull up into a parking lot and saw a man. It turned out to be a .44 Magnum pointing at later learned it was a prostitute. And so I got out of the car, told him to drop the gun. He turned around and fired at me. And at nighttime, the muzzle flash of a .44 Magnum is quite intense.
I can only imagine.
So I just fired 2 shots back at him, and one of the rounds happened to hit his gun, knocked it out of his hand. But
No kidding.
yeah, it's pretty exciting down there.
You telling me that was a happy accident, Richard?
Yeah, that was a happy accident.
Bob Ross, shout out to you. Happy accident, law enforcement. Anyways, that's amazing. See, when I said that he's a badass, I really had no idea how badass he was until he just explained. That's amazing. Thank you, Richard.
Well, thank you.
That's incredible. Let me just shake your hand again, man. That's amazing. Super badass. Anyways, okay. So here's what I want to talk about today, guys, is obviously you're a combat veteran. So you understand, or at least have an idea of what these veterans are going through when they come back from combat and the struggles that they have to deal with upon return. So what is your opinion and passion involving cannabis treatment for PTSD?
From what I've read on it and seen how some of my friends have responded to it, I think it's a marvelous way to deal with it. I can tell you, personally, I know of somebody who is an alcoholic who has spent some time in jail, but could not break that alcoholism, and then finally took on a cannabis therapy, and to this day, 2 years without a drink. So this person, it's really helped them, and I've really seen the help that it has done for some people. Even in my own situation, it's helped me. I'm a cancer survivor, throat cancer. I got it from a virus, never smoked cigarettes in my life.
Really?
And the chemotherapy is something that's basically poisoning you, trying to kill the cancer.
Yeah.
And that was a very hard thing to go through, but I found that the oils from cannabis oils really took away the nausea, especially. So for me personally, it helped me, and to this day, the oils still help me because I have residual from radiation therapy. Lost all my teeth from the radiation, but it killed the cancer. But I get muscle cramps, which also helps. The cannabinoids help with that.
Sure, relax the muscles and all that. Well, that's amazing. Well, definitely, along with that, absolutely, I believe that, cannabis treatment for PTSD is viable. It needs to be involved in educating and informing combat veterans when they come back as to this is a treatment. I know there's a ton of groups out there that are really trying to fight for this, fight for the knowledge and the information out there to be provided. So as a medical provider or medical professional, what is your opinion and passion involving cannabis lie with PTSD?
The place to start, for instance, if you're a medical professional and you're wondering what now, There are people who've done great work. There's a fellow, I hope I'm not mispronouncing his name, Milamide in Colorado, who's done a lot of work with veterans returning with PTSD, and is a huge advocate of cannabis. As a result, I in my own practice found that cannabis helped primarily not just because it was so safe, but because it didn't have the side effects that the other drugs people wanted to be prescribing gave veterans. They didn't like the others. They preferred the natural cannabis. So,
well, it seems to come with, at least from what I've seen from veterans in a retail setting of talking to veterans when they come in and their experience, it seems to be one of those things that is a healthier alternative as opposed to taking opiates that can lead to a whole nother type of struggle.
Opiates, antidepressants, anxiolytics, they all have their death rates, you know, and if you're, again, going to start with something that doesn't have a death rate, that might be a good idea.
Yeah. Well, and I believe that it starts with informing our combat veterans and informing the general public as to the good that can come from,
very true,
you know, letting our combat veterans choose for themselves. And if that's somewhere they want to go with it. Like you said, it's a healthier alternative, and why go with something that could kill you when there's something that is definitely proven that it won't. So absolutely. So Richard, do you have anything to add to that, to the PTSD, or in your personal experience, how, aside from cancer, how cannabis has helped you?
I can also interject my law enforcement experience. Coming from South Florida, of course, that was a gateway for a lot of drugs. But we had you have a lot of calls, domestics. I never in my life, working in law enforcement, went to any call involving marijuana where there was violence. Never went to a domestic or anything where marijuana was used. It's always been alcohol. Alcohol was always the precursor to violence for some reason. But a little tidbit of information on that is just that I just never saw any violence related to marijuana use.
Sure. And how many years were you in law enforcement altogether?
Since 1974 to 1990.
That's pretty good stats, considering that much time in law enforcement in a busy area. Obviously, you were in the thick of it, being undercover and being a general badass, Richard. That you were obviously involved in a lot of stuff, and having never dealt with aggressive stoners, if you will, on the force. Yeah. That's good, and you know that helps to kind of help break a stereotype that violence. A lot of times when dealing with drugs on the black market, marijuana might be involved, but there's also a lot of other hard drugs. Is why violent crime comes to be, where sometimes marijuana is involved, because there's a plethora of other drugs being dealt with at the same time. But it always seems like marijuana and cannabis is focused on to try and bring light to that, whereas everybody else knows the other drugs are bad. So it's just, that's the hard part, is trying to break a stereotype.
Started with reefer madness.
Reefer madness.
Never had a chance to break free of reefer madness.
Absolutely, that's true, and we're still fighting those. I mean, how many years later are we still fighting these same stereotypes?
It's going on 90.
90, exactly, 90 years.
Also, some states have really horrendous penalties for just small use or possessions.
Yeah.
And people are in prison just for having
mandatory minimum sentences were 2 to 10 years, depending on the officer you got, the judge you got, or, where you got busted, the situation. I mean, all kinds of things. And like you said, there are plenty of situations of people in prison for long amounts of time for very, very small amount of possession.
Yes.
So that's the hard part, is, once again, breaking the stereotype, taking it out of the black market's hands and putting it in professionals' hands where we can help regulate and make sure that it's brought to light in the right way. That's the most important thing to me, is to make sure that as a cannabis user, I myself am representing the cannabis industry in a good light. I believe we're all stewards of civil rights, and that we have a responsibility, and I've said this before and I will continue to say it, is that we have a responsibility as cannabis users, cannabis advocates, cannabis retailers, growers, to make sure that we make this industry what it has always meant to be, which is safe, protected, and healthy.
Yes, there's an opportunity for great good in what you say.
Yes.
Absolutely, and also great harm if it's not. We touched on that last week, which is the words that we use to describe the fight or not fight that is being put to. Sometimes those of us that are involved in the fight on a constant basis forget that there are people out there that have a lot to lose, and the laws are what are restraining people, not necessarily their personal ethics or their personal morals. So before you judge people for their unwillingness to step up, maybe take a look at their situation first. I'm bad about that myself, because I am always in the fight, and I'm always wanting to fight and punch and kick my way through these stereotypes. And sometimes I will look at somebody and say, well, how come you're not stepping up? How come you're not fighting? Well, maybe they don't have the opportunity to do that the way I do. Maybe they don't have the support, the backing, to do that, and they have a lot to lose. So it's just all about informing and educating, and sometimes people can still help with this movement in just not being aggressively opposed to it, and just simply saying, hey, that's okay, let them do what they want. Yeah. So that's what it's about, right, Richard?
Yeah.
Freedom of choice.
Freedom
of choice, freedom of medication, to choose a healthy medication, a healthy alternative to some of the options that we have been forced or pushed to believe are healthier.
Yeah, and it's important to understand, there are people who respond to that, and then those who don't. We're not making any claims that everybody should get this all the time, no matter what. We're not making any claims that it cures everything all the time. We're saying there's a part of our people who are needlessly suffering for the want of a safe medication.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to just open this up for general education, general information. Let's start putting away the hatred for it and open up and say, whether you are a user or not, just educate yourself. Simple as that. Just educate yourself as to the truth, and not about what you've been told or what you've been led to believe, but the actual truth of what this is doing for your neighbor, for the guy down the street.
Oh my goodness.
So who knows? I mean, when I got into this business, I had no idea. Or your
veteran.
Vet. That's right. Your combat veteran. That's the thing. Before I got into this industry, I had no idea. I thought I was just a pockets of people. And then when I came in and I saw that it was just everybody in every type of walk of life that has used cannabis for one reason or another, medical, recreational, whether we want to admit it or not, most people can say they have taken cannabis for some form of medical reason. Yeah. Even if you say, well, I only smoke recreationally. If you think about it, maybe you use it for stress, maybe you use it for anxiety. I know for me, I always said I was a recreational user, but I'm kind of a jerk. And I'm stressed, and I'm very anxious. And so for me, it just helps to relieve all that, get all that out of the way so I can think clearly and I just feel healthier. CBDs have helped me immensely with. Absolutely.
Then vets are walking examples of how cannabis should work. There's so many things that happen for the vets that cannabis is helpful for.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. So many things.
Chronic pains, concussions and migraines, the anxiety, the post-traumatic, the sleep disorders, the dreams. There's so many, and the substance abuse.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a very hard thing, and I know I have relatives who are combat veterans who have been on opiates and hard narcotics since coming back, and they struggle with that, and it has always been about having to go to jump to another doctor, jump to this doctor, jump through these hoops and go through these, and still not regulating the medication, still having episodes with all that medication, and then simply turning to cannabis and then just watch as it completely levels out. Everything that they deal with, like you said.
When it works, it's a beautiful thing.
It is, absolutely. Well, I want to thank you guys so much, Richard.
Thank you.
Obviously for being a general badass.
Thank you.
Makai as well, being a general badass, and just being knowledgeable and being willing to come and sit down with me and talk with me.
Well, I appreciate
Been fun.
I love you guys. This is awesome. Thank you. Hey, WEEDnesday! Check us out! Makai's running away. He's out of here. WEEDnesday, check us out! Bye.